Welcome. This is Catholic Discovery 101, a program dedicated to sharing the Catholic faith that we love with all our friends and family in Pocatello Chubbuck community. I'm Diane Nisita, and in our guest chair today we have Deacon Richard Kulleck. And Deacon Richard is the director of the formation of deacons and lay ministers for the Roman Catholic Diocese of Boise, and I like to say, and all of Idaho. Our focus today will be Servant School, and Servant School is the name of Deacon Richard's responsibility. And in the interests of disclosure, I have to say that I am in my fourth year, starting in August, of this very same Servant School. Welcome, Deacon Richard.
Thank you for having me, Diane.
It is a pleasure. I was waiting to have you for such a long time. But before we begin talking about Servant School, how about a little about yourself, your formation, your personal formation into being a deacon, and also a little bit about how you ended up with your beautiful wife here in Idaho, because I happen to know you're not Idaho natives.
No, we came from Chicago 5 years ago. I was ordained for the Archdiocese of Chicago in 2001. And my wife and I had an idyllic life. I had a secure job. We were living in the home that her grandmother had lived in before us and had lived there for 28 years. Our two sons had grown and moved away, and we didn't need to change the locks. They were fully settled on their own. And so, life was good. We were fully involved in ministry in our own parish, and life was good. And then my wife happened to see an ad for this job in Idaho. And she showed it to me, and one thing led to another. I had just told her within a couple months prior to that if I could do anything in the world, and I knew I couldn't fail, I would like to direct a formation program. And here this opportunity came up, and we came.
You jumped in with both feet.
We jumped in with both feet. From
Chicago to Boise.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, that's not such a big change, is it?
Not really. Not so bad. Although, the Archdiocese of Chicago is, you can travel from one end to the other in 2 hours.
Wow.
So 84,500 square miles of the state of Idaho, that has proven to be logistically challenging.
I can well imagine. I can imagine also that you hear about it from time to time. Richard, are you really expecting us to do this?
Oh, yes. Well, but I travel myself, so I'm not asking the students to do anything that I don't do. A lot of the funding for Servant School is grant related. And when I write for the grants, I always say the same thing. This program is mutually inconvenient for everybody.
Okay, that's great. That's how you got to Idaho. Now about your personal, professional formation. How did that happen?
Well, I'm a convert to Catholicism. I had no faith as a child. I was raised without faith, and came to Catholicism through a series of important people and reading when I was about 19. I came to Catholicism, and as you might know from people who convert to any faith, that there is extra fervor in those cases. So after marrying my wife and getting involved in ministry...
Was she also a convert?
No, she was a cradle Catholic.
Okay.
But we were very involved in the parish, and everything was fine. And I had been actually approached about becoming a deacon a few times, and had turned it down.
Now, you would have been in your 20s by this time?
No, by this time I would have been in my 30s.
Okay, so 10 years have gone by. You have been a practicing Catholic for a decade.
Mm-hmm. And people would approach me and say, you think about this, and I just wasn't interested. My attitudes about the ordained diaconate was that it was really meant for minority communities. And
minority communities.
Minority communities. And so when I looked at myself in this Irish parish in Chicago, I always joke with people that we were very diverse. We had both shanty and lace curtain Irish in that parish. We were very diverse. We had both kinds. But I just didn't think it was meant for me, and that was fine. I was happy. And then one Sunday, my pastor called me aside and said, "I'd like you to look into becoming a deacon." And I told him I wasn't interested, and we didn't have any deacons in the parish. So I thought, well, why me? I mean, why now? Why me? I had all those kind of questions.
This is early 2000s now, right?
Actually, late 90s.
Oh, okay.
But I agreed with him that I would go to the information session to learn about the program before I made a final decision. But I was not inclined to become engaged in it. And so my wife and I went to this information session. There were about 60 couples in the room. It was a big, big gathering. And the gentleman who presented the program said a couple things, but one of the things he said was, if you want to learn how to serve the poor, this is the program for you. And when I looked at my own spiritual life, it seemed to me that I had a strong sense of worship and prayer, in both privately and in the community. I was serving the community. I was doing a lot of things for the parish community, but I wasn't doing anything for those people that when you read the Gospels, you see Jesus involved with all the time. The poor, the widows, the orphans, the lame. And so I thought to myself, if the Gospel is calling me to that, what am I doing? So I went back to the pastor and I said, I don't know about becoming a deacon, but I want that training. The training that guy's offering, I want that. So that's how I entered formation myself. And one thing led to another, and I was ordained in 2001.
Are you, in your family, are you the only ordained person?
I have a half-brother who's a priest. Now, I mean, when you hear that I was raised without faith, and that I have a half-brother that's a priest, it becomes a very convoluted story.
Okay, we can't actually do that.
No, I wouldn't think so.
But that is interesting. The family must have been...
very diverse.
Well, I was going to say, I was thinking of their reaction. It must have been a mixed reaction to the fact?
Well, my mom raised me pretty much by myself. My dad and my brother's dad had died when I was 5. So that Catholic influence was gone from my life very early on. So, but my father's family was very interested to hear that I was taking this path.
Okay, that priest in Chicago must have been thrilled. He was happy. Yes. He was a happy guy, right?
Yeah, he's a happy guy.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. There's more here, but we have to be moving along.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, let's talk about servant school now.
Okay.
And perhaps we can begin by talking about the mission of, and the 4 dimensions of servant school as I have been exposed to.
Okay.
Mission first?
It's the need of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Boise to form lay ministers and men for the diaconate to serve all the communities around the state. We have parishes as far north as Bonners Ferry, as far southeast as Soda Springs, and along where Yellowstone is, Riggins and St. Anthony's, and in there, and in the southwest corner of the state, even southwest of Boise. So there's Catholic communities in this whole state, and with the priest shortage, which I think is well documented and publicized, there's a need for committed ministers in all these communities. And so the mission of servant school is to prepare competent and confident ministers for all those places, so that the people of God can be served.
Servant school.
Servant school.
Right, okay. Now the 4 dimensions, because this fits right in.
It does. Well, all formation is really self-formation. Everybody's got to take responsibility for their own growth in their faith. But Pope John Paul II, when he was alive, sort of articulated a vision for all formation, whether it's priestly or diaconate or lay ministry.
This is going back 50 years now.
Probably. That all formation really had 4 dimensions to it. One is an intellectual dimension, that you become knowledgeable about the content of the faith. So that's one piece. And very often people sort of think that's it. Well, as long as I know my faith, then I'm ready to go. But Blessed John Paul II saw it in a slightly different way, and that was that besides knowing the content of your faith, that's not the same as knowing Jesus Christ. That's really the bedrock and the key to the whole thing. The foundation of it is a personal relationship with Jesus that then inspires your intellectual curiosity to begin to understand what the content of the faith is. But why would I even want to understand what the content is if I didn't have that personal relationship with God and Jesus.
How would servant school promote personal relationship?
Well, when we're together, as you know well, part of every weekend is praying together. So that's a big dimension of it, is engaging in worship as a community.
The reason I'm pushing on this, Richard, is that many people, even Catholics, don't understand the term personal relationship and are a little confused by it, thinking that that isn't a Catholic thing. And they would be greatly mistaken.
And they would be greatly mistaken.
Okay, that's dimension number 2.
Well, and there's other parts of how and we can talk about that later, how the spirituality dimension is served. The third dimension is a human dimension, that anybody who's going to be successful in ministry has to develop the human characteristics that are necessary for that kind of interaction. So we're talking about the ability to express yourself clearly, to disclose personally but appropriately, to be honest, to be compassionate. There's a whole realm of human characteristics that aren't necessarily faith-related, but they're very human and necessary for human growth and for healthy human interaction. So that's another dimension of this. So you have the intellectual, the spiritual, the human, and then there's a pastoral dimension. The fourth dimension is a pastoral dimension, where not only are we learning the content of the faith, not only are we growing in our relationship with Jesus, not only are we growing in these human characteristics that are necessary for a minister, but we're learning how to apply all that in a real ministerial situation.
Example?
Working with clients in a homeless shelter, for instance, or visiting sick people in the hospital or at home. Those kinds of things are to give people practical application. I'm learning all this theology, but really, how do I use it when I'm sitting next to someone who has just gotten a diagnosis of cancer? Or when I'm sitting next to someone who found out that they're going to have their leg amputated in the morning.
Yikes, yeah.
Or sitting with a homeless guy who's trying to figure out how he can pull himself out of that situation so he can be more used to his family again.
Okay, that's a nice global presentation. I thank you for that. Now let's talk about who. Who, if there's anybody out listening and watching this, how would they recognize themselves? Who actually goes through the application process for servant school?
It seems to me there are two drivers there. One is an interior nudge. Now, I had that nudge when I went to that presentation. And
we didn't talk about that, the nudge part.
Well, when that guy said, "I can teach you how to serve the poor," I felt that all of a sudden that hole in my own spiritual life was I was doing all this stuff, and I'm sure exteriorly everybody said, "Oh, that's a good Catholic boy," but I wasn't serving the last and the least. And that was the interior nudge for me, was that, oh, I need to do something about that. I need to do more than I'm doing.
And specifically, we would call that a call, Holy Spirit.
Yes.
Acting and you reacting.
Yes, and I think that primarily when I talk to people who are presenting themselves for the program, that's what I hear, is I should be doing more and I don't know what else to do.
Okay, so that's what you listen for when you actually are interviewing candidates. Okay, where does this occur? How does servant school?
Well, and that's the second, I think, prong of the call, is that not only is a call personal and interior, but a call also comes from the church. So these are individuals, men and women, who have been identified by their pastor or by the parish staff as having special gifts for ministry and a strong desire to serve.
So it doesn't work, you just think, this is for me, and then go straight to you. You would have to have a support for this.
You have to be supported by your local community. Now, sometimes people do present themselves to me without that, and my response is always, that's great. Go talk to your pastor and see if he can support you in this.
Okay, where does the actual servant school work? Because Idaho is
because of the whole state, right? Well, and as you know, it's mutually inconvenient for everyone. We have about 4 academic weekends a year, and the academic weekends are the time when everyone has to be with us. Everybody who's
you
involved.
haven't mentioned how long this program is when you say everyone.
Oh, it's 4 years.
4 years.
It's
okay.
4 years. Thank you. So every year there are 4 academic sessions, usually anyway. So the first one we always do in Moscow, Idaho. The second one we always do in Pocatello, right here. The third one we do in Boise. And then if there's a fourth one, we're back in Pocatello for the fourth one. So every few months the students gather, all the students in the school gather in one of those 4 places to get about 15 hours of intensive classroom exposure. And then at the end of the weekend, the instructors give them reading and writing assignments that last from 8 to 16 weeks. So they go home and do this homework on their own and submit to the instructor, usually via email or some sort of electronic media. So that's how the academic piece works. The spirituality piece.
You didn't mention Saturdays, though.
Well, Saturdays I don't envision Saturdays as being part of the academic curriculum.
I see, okay.
I see Saturdays as being part of the spirituality and the pastoral
And you were leading into
component.
that. Yes,
Right.
I'm sorry.
So the spirituality piece is handled by every person in the program is supposed to be talking to someone about their prayer life. So a spiritual director is an important component for everybody in the program, but that's a one-on-one relationship. Everybody in the program is also expected to attend these Saturdays that you alluded to, where the topics are things like discernment, or praying with the Bible, or reading the Psalms, or there's a number of...
Or Liturgy of the Hours.
Exactly. The spirituality component is involved with that. So they're coming one Saturday a month when they don't have an academic weekend. So I try not to pile it up. If you have an academic weekend one month, then you have a Saturday in another month where there isn't an academic weekend.
I'm glad you mentioned that. It was a part of, because I know people considering this wonder what kind of time commitment is going to be.
It's rigorous. Everybody, and I'm sure you would testify to this yourself, that every student who goes through it goes, it's a lot of work. But I think that it works in terms of growing in competence and confidence.
And confidence.
Yeah.
Confidence. Okay. My next question is credits. Do you allow, or does this program allow a transfer of credits?
There's the people who teach the academic component are all university professors. They all have terminal degrees, by which I mean a PhD or a doctorate in ministry, for instance. So I get a lot of our faculty from Gonzaga University. I get some from Villanova in Philadelphia. One of our instructors is the head of the theology department at Mount Angel Seminary. So these people come into the program wherever the class is being taught, and they teach it. And the reason we came up with 15 hours of instruction was because 15 hours of instruction in most distance learning programs equates to 1 graduate credit.
Oh, so that's an official graduate credit that can possibly be applied if another degree
was sought.
Okay.
Now, normally you'd have to have a bachelor's degree to pursue the
Well, how about that? Is a bachelor's degree necessary in servant school?
No, it is not. The requirement for someone seeking ordination as a deacon is a high school diploma or its equivalent. But that's the only academic requirement to get into the program.
Okay. That means that there's a broad base of different kinds of people coming in. I want to talk about spouses and...
I'm sorry?
Spouses. What happens to a spouse, I suppose?
Oh, sure. One of my concerns...
Withdrawn the attention of the spouse with this time commitment.
Well, I'm concerned about that. It is a rigorous program, and so generally speaking, when I interview, if the person's married, I interview both husband and wife. And I try to make sure that the person not involved in the program is fully aware of the requirement, the time requirement, the energy requirement. But then the spouse is invited to participate at no additional cost.
Oh, really?
So when you see couples, in school with you, only one tuition is involved.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the courses, the actual names of the courses.
Okay. We start with communication skills for ministry, and I consider that sort of that's wading in as opposed to diving in. It's user-friendly. The teacher, Sister Meg Sass, is very gentle, and the coursework isn't terrible and because most of these students are returning students. They're generally in their 40s or 50s. They haven't been to school in 30 years. So that's one of the big problems is I'm coming into this and I haven't been to school in 30 years and oh my God, is this going to be hard? So Sister Meg is very gentle, and it's a very gentle course. The second course is Foundations in Theology, where we give people a real grounding in theological language, in the kind of terms and the resources that are available for a person studying theology. That's taught by a Father Boniface Lautz, who's a Benedictine from Jerome. And he is also very gentle, but he has extraordinary academic credentials. And so we focus on the papal document De Verbum, which is about revelation. Is how does God communicate with humanity? And so we talk a lot about that through Scripture, through personal experience, all the ways that God communicates to the people he loves.
Can I just talk about evaluation? Because that's usually a bugbear. People worry about grading. How does that work?
The teachers all fill out evaluations for each student. The evaluations have 10 metrics, and the metrics cover things like, did the assignments on time? The assignments were well done. This person is well suited for ministry. This person is open to new ideas. This person communicates clearly. Those are the kinds of things, and they're marked as excellent, very good, good, or needs improvement. So it's pretty gentle, but of course, what's really interesting to me is to watch the students' reaction to getting the evaluations, which is very much, well, what did you get? And especially when husbands and wives are participating together, when the wife does better than the husband who wants to be a deacon, it's always interesting to watch.
Oh, you must have a good time with
I do have a good time with that. I wanted to say before, too, that I am concerned of the pull on a marriage from this, all this involvement. And so I do invite the spouses to participate. We do a marital evaluation early in the program so they can get a read on their own relationship and the things in their relationship that might need attention. You
told me that the female spouse has a specific obligation to do a top-down view of what's going on with her husband. Can you talk about that?
Well, in the first year, the female spouse has to do everything that her husband does if he's approaching diaconate, if he's presenting himself for diaconate. And that's so she has a real good idea of what this will take for the next 3 years. Because I need her permission. He needs his permission. He needs her permission to apply. He needs her permission to continue at every step.
Oh, Richard, that's very interesting.
So, so this gives her informed consent. It's or informed. We're not doing this, but it is informed. She knows exactly what it's going to cost, energy-wise, time-wise, and then
focus-wise.
Right, and then she can say, "I'm in this with you." Or you can do this and I will be there to support you, or this isn't for us. And that, I think,
do you see that?
It's important to have all three options open. I do.
Okay. So that's a little bit scary. I think if the husband feels a call and he doesn't get cooperation.
Yeah, that I would imagine that could be a ticklish conversation in the home. But I try to facilitate that conversation because
you sit down with them.
I do, and what I always tell everybody in the program is family comes first, and then your job comes second. I don't want this to interfere with your job. I don't want you to stay home to do your homework.
Because deacons don't get paid.
Deacons don't get paid, neither do lay ministers in most cases. Most people are doing this purely voluntary. So the family has to stay intact because the family and the marriage is a primary witness to the community of the presence of Christ.
I have a question. You mentioned that most of your candidates come in over 40-ish, I think you said.
Yes.
But there are younger people who have young children.
Young children.
So there is a full complement of people who feel the call earlier on and who managed to fit this into their life with growing children.
This year we'll be ordaining 6 men to the diaconate, one of whom is barely 35. And has a child who's only 4.
Oh, wonderful.
Another guy who's in his 40s, his wife is due next Tuesday with their 4th child. And all of them are under 7. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we have a veteran from the Iraqi War who's well past 60. And so that gives you something of the scope of the...
It does. I wanted everybody to understand there's a full range of people who feel the call. Retreats. Let's talk about retreats.
Oh, that's another part of the spirituality component.
They're going to show a picture of retreats. Do you remember the picture, and can you describe what's going on?
The bishop, just before the men are ordained, they are required to make a 5-day retreat. So they do this normally at the monastery in Jerome. So they go away on Wednesday night, and they're there until Sunday at about noon. The picture that people are seeing is one session during that retreat when their wives are invited for lunch and to sit down with them and the bishop who comes.
I see.
And the chancellor. And they have a very free-flowing, easy conversation about what the bishop expects of them once they're ordained, once these families enter into that style of ministry. And they get to ask the bishop anything they want to. And the bishop gets to know them, because frankly they come from all over the state, and he may know some of them, but maybe not all of them. So it gives the bishop some face time with each one.
I think we should also mention that there are retreats for lay people like myself.
Right. Yeah, that particular retreat is just for the men, but there's a retreat for everybody in the program every year.
Okay.
And that's a weekend retreat, Friday to Sunday. But it's not like the academic weekends. It is a spiritual retreat. So there's a lot of downtime. There's no homework given. There's no reading to do. It's sitting with others and listening to spirituality topics.
I just came off one. It was a gift.
Sharing and a lot of time to think and reflect.
Yes. Okay, the second picture that will be shown is a graduation, I believe. Do you remember that one? Or maybe it wasn't a graduation. The bishop was there, though.
Yes, those men in that picture are all progressing through the program. Every year, a man who is seeking to become a deacon has a ritual step to take. After that first year of discernment, if everything goes well with them and with the program and with their pastor, they become a candidate for holy orders. And so that's a ritual step. And the second year, they become an official lector in the church. And the third year, they become an official acolyte. And then the fourth year, at the end of the fourth year, they're ordained.
I think we need to mention the difference between the permanent deacon, the acolyte.
And the transition. Well, liturgically, they're the same. It's exactly the same order in the church. But the Catholic Church has for a long time used the diaconate as the final stage of formation for priesthood. So everybody who eventually becomes a Roman Catholic priest transitions through a year or so of being a deacon. But the men in my program are permanent deacons. They won't transition past that point.
They stay deacons for the rest of their life.
Sometimes I wonder too, when we're dealing with an audience where there are many Mormons, I know the term bishop can mean something different, as the term deacon means something different in that community than it does in ours.
Can you flesh that out a little bit?
Well, for a Roman Catholic, the bishop is the person with spiritual responsibility for every soul within his territory. And bishops are responsible for large territories, like Bishop Mike Driscoll is responsible for every soul in the state of Idaho. Whereas I think in Mormon terminology, a bishop is the pastor has that title. So
the Roman Catholic pastor would be the equivalent.
Yes. Thank you. So then a deacon, I think in the Mormon faith, deacons are, generally speaking, that's a transition to the mission, that a young man becomes a deacon at a very early age as he begins to study for going on the mission.
Richard?
But you can't be a deacon in the Catholic Church until you're 35, so...
Oh, I'm glad we mentioned that. Our time is up.
Oh!
I want to thank you very much for two things, for sharing your personal faith journey with us and for helping us to understand servant school. And we're going to put your contact details as the program finishes. I thanked Richard, and now I want to thank you for watching. If there's some part of the program you've missed or you want to recommend it to anybody that's out there, we are on the air again on Sundays at 6 o'clock in the evening and Tuesday mornings at 10:30. I'm Diane Nisita, wishing God to rain His blessings down on all of us, each and every one of us.